Alright, Assalamu alaikum, a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, bismillahir rahmanir rahim, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een, rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. So what I wanted to talk about today is a little bit of perspective, I would say. I think that many of us are living at a time where there's a lot of terrible things happening. And I think that for our human mind and our heart, it can become very difficult to process the terrible things that are happening. In the last few years, we've seen the genocide in Gaza, what's happening in Sudan, what's happening all over Muslim lands. And then, recently with the Epstein files, etc. So I think what happens is that it can become very easy to be overwhelmed. And in fact, part of the sort of technique of the shaitan and his army is to overwhelm. So overwhelm is intentional. What do I mean by that? For example, when the heart is exposed to sin or anything that is shameful, the first time that the heart is exposed, the heart will feel pain. The second time the heart is exposed, the heart will feel pain. The third time, maybe a little bit less. The fourth, the fifth, and so on and so forth. But as the heart becomes exposed to shamelessness, evil, sin, wrongdoing, the heart can become something called desensitized to it. Just like, when you take a medicine, the first time you take it, it's very effective. Then the second time, it's still effective. Third, but if you start to take that medicine enough, your body builds what's called a tolerance to the medicine. Our heart, there is something called spiritual tolerance in the sense, and this is not the positive kind. There's positive type of tolerance, but then there is the negative type, which is desensitization. That it doesn't hurt the heart as much over repeated exposure. And this is what we must protect our hearts from. We actually have to protect our hearts and our children's hearts from desensitization. Desensitization happens when there is too much exposure to something that is evil, something that is shameless, something that is ithm, anything that is bad. And so on the one hand, please be aware that one of the techniques of evil is to desensitize us through repeated exposure. Something that 10 years ago we would have considered extremely shameless, we have now become accustomed to, and that is through exposure through media. And you guys can think of many examples of that. So first of all, there is we have to protect our hearts from desensitization through repeated exposure. What does that mean practically? It means that we have to guard our eyes. It means we have to guard our ears. It means we have to guard our tongue in order to protect our hearts. Let me break down what that means. When you are not filtering what you take in. Now I want you to think about the body for example. Imagine that you have very dirty water and you're drinking that water every day without any filter. What's going to happen over time? The impurities of the water are going to affect your insides, right? Simply put. That's exactly what happens to the spiritual heart. If we are not filtering what's coming in, if we are not filtering what's coming in through the openings to the heart, what are the openings to the heart? The eyes, the ears, and the tongue. This means we have to be very, very mindful what we are looking at, what we are reading, what we are watching, what we are hearing, and what we are speaking. Because all of that is input to the heart. There are several reasons why overwhelm can happen. One of the reasons overwhelm can happen is simply because of the quality of the input. If the input is not filtered, you are taking in poison. Imagine it's poisonous water without filtration. And what happens over time is the heart becomes overwhelmed. The heart can actually become sick if the input is poison. And until it gets to such an extreme level that the heart can actually die. This is spiritual death. So what happens to the heart, just like the body, is that if you are sipping poison into your body every single day, maybe it's microdoses of poison. If you're sipping it into the body, over time, what's going to happen to the body? It will first become weak. You will be overwhelming the immune system. And then it will become sick. So first we become weak, and then we're overwhelming the immune system. And then it becomes sick, and then eventually it dies. The exact same process happens to the heart, the spiritual heart. If we are sipping poison through our eyes, what we are inputting, it goes directly to the heart. What we're listening to and what we're speaking, we have to be mindful of that because it is input, it is food for the soul, it is soul food. And so just like you are picky about what you eat, I hope, you ask, is this halal? You ask, maybe, is this organic? But at least you ask, is this poison? Yeah? We're not gonna drink the same liquid that we use to clean our bathroom. Everyone agree? You seem unsure. You agree? We are picky about what we drink, what we take in. We are not going to drink Drano, but we're going to use it for what it's needed for. So this is how we must treat our heart when it comes to input. It's not okay to just input anything. We have to start to be very, very careful. Just like you are careful not to drink poison, just like you're careful to read the label. Make sure you're not drinking cyanide. Make sure it doesn't have rat poison in it before you drink it. You have to be just as careful with your media input. With your media input. This means social media, for sure, because that's what we're using, that's what we're drinking most. That's what we're eating most. You have to be very, very careful to tailor your news feed. Train your algorithm. Why? Because see, your feed, I want you to imagine that is like your fridge. That is what you will eat that day. Everyone understand? What's on your phone is your fridge. Your fridge is your phone. Your phone is your fridge. And so whatever is on that feed that you are reading, that you are watching, that you are listening to, and then you are talking about, that is the food in your fridge. That is the drinks in your fridge. You have to make sure you're cleaning it out. You have to make sure that there are not bottles of poison in your fridge. You have to make sure that what you're eating is not covered with mold. Is everyone understanding this? How does that apply to what's happening today? Well, there is a whole spectrum here when we talk about soul food and heart food, okay? On the one hand, there is healthy food. Food that will nourish your soul, will nourish your heart, will nourish your body, right? And that is what you want to fill your fridge with. This is your media fridge. Is everyone following? So that is things that are going to empower, that are going to purify, that are going to strengthen, that are going to grow. And you have to be very conscious of what that content is. This is the content of your fridge, not just the content of your phone. Then over here on the spectrum, we start to get into useless things. So maybe we'll call this junk food. So you have the healthy food, which is like the organic. And then you have useless things. This is the junk food of the soul. There is junk food for the heart and soul, also in our media. What is that? Well, we'll call the junk food the useless stuff. Maybe this is just people talking about fashion all the time. Maybe this is 10 million ways to, pin your hijab, or how to wear your hijab, or how to wear that, or how to wear this, how to, put your makeup on, etc., etc. Now, while that is not gonna kill you, right? A bag of Doritos isn't gonna kill you, but it's not nourishing either. And so what you have to do when you're sort of designing your fridge, you're tailoring what's in there, is that you have to, just like you would want for your body to sort of minimize the junk food. It doesn't mean it's haram. It's not haram to eat a donut, but it's not healthy either. And over time, too much of it will do what? It will make you weak and sick. Does that make sense? So just being mindful that there is an element of healthy input that we have to increase. And by the way, I say this because we have to be conscious. If you are passively ingesting media, please know that you are ingesting poison and you are ingesting a lot of junk food. If you're passively ingesting, you're like, whatever's in the fridge, you know what I mean? No, you can't do that. You have to actively tailor what's in your fridge, or else you will be passively taking in poison along with junk. Okay? So in the junk category, we said that the healthy category is something that enriches your soul, something that reminds you of your purpose, something that reminds you of Allah and His Messenger, something that reminds you of the hereafter, something that reorients you, something that purifies you, reminds you of what will nourish your heart and your soul. So we understand that. Now in the junk category, these are things that are just dunya. And I gave some examples. Now, like I said, these aren't haram. These aren't haram. But excessive junk food will be harmful, especially when there isn't real good food, right? If all you're eating day and night is Doritos and potato chips and candy and donuts, and that's it, and there is no healthy food, you're not going to be healthy. I mean, it's really simple. Does that make sense? And so we have to be mindful that the media we take in, because this is our food, and we are what we eat. I need to emphasize, we are what we eat. What we eat, what we focus on actually becomes what we are. Let me give you an example. So they find in studies, that when people consume, especially when they looked at studies with teenagers, and when teenagers are consuming more social media, by and large, there are certain outcomes. So the more social media, the more they are seeing things like anxiety, depression, suicidality, being dissatisfied with their own body, being dissatisfied with their own life. So there is a connection between this input and how their actual state. Why? Well, because if the input is all dunya, mixed in with some poison, we'll get to that. But I'm talking just dunya at this point. I'm talking like nothing haram, but all just fashion. Nothing haram, but just fashionistas, influencers eating a burger, right? Or, going to Dubai. And that's it. Or fashioning their hijab in this way and that way, and I'm, again, this is not haram. This is just Doritos. it's just donuts. And I would say that there is some level of it that is gonna get more harmful. But I'm talking the cleanest of it, where it is just dunya. It is just superficial. Please understand that is not harmless. Because what we focus on is what we become. And I'll tell you why that happens. Here is the mechanism. What you focus on grows. What you focus on grows. So now I want you to imagine that your focus is Dubai blink. All right? What you're wearing, what the brand is, what you're eating, where you're going, who you're with. Okay. So your focus is basically, we'll call this the superficial things of life. Now, assuming there's no haram in here, yeah, it's allowed. It's allowed to wear nice things. It's allowed to eat nice things. As long as it's halal. It's allowed to go to Dubai. like all these things are not haram, right? But when the focus becomes the superficial parts of life, guess what happens to the superficial parts of life? They grow in your eyes. And when I say they grow, I don't mean you get more blink. No, you don't. They grow in importance in your eyes. They grow in importance. All of a sudden, what kind of car you drive becomes more important if that's what you're focused on. All of a sudden, how you look, the size of your waist, how much you weigh. This is why the issues with body image are become so much worsened with social media usage in young people. It's because it's the focus on it that makes it more important, and then there's the comparisons. And then of course there's the filtering, the skewing of reality, because what you're seeing isn't even reality. It's a filtered version of reality. It's a fake, let's call it an AI version of reality. Now we have AI. We used to have filters. We used to have Photoshop. Now we have AI. But ultimately, what do they all have in common? They are all fake. They are all fake. They are not real. They are fake and they are superficial. Even if they're real, even if that's her real nose, it's still the surface. Do you understand? So it's even if it's not fake, even if it's real, it's still just the surface. It's still the superficial. part of dunya. Our body and how our body looks and our skin color and how thin or how our body shape is or how much, what we wear, how much money we have. These are all the superficial part of dunya. These are all the shell. This is the shell, right? Now, no one is saying to neglect that. But when that becomes the focus, its importance grows in your eyes. And that is why it will start to become more important than the things that actually matter. Does that make sense? Are you following this? The phenomenon here is what you focus on grows. If you focus on the superficial will look more and more important to you. How your body looks. This is why teenagers are suffering with body image issues. It's because of the media that they're ingesting. If they are not taking in these images on a daily basis, and it becomes the food. If this idea of this is how your life should be, right? Whatever that is, whatever influencer is living a certain kind of way, if that becomes your focus, that's what you're drinking and eating each day, then inside of you, that becomes the standard. That becomes more money, status, appearances. For us women, it can become really easy to think very quickly that our worth is based on how we look, based on the shade of our skin. You know, how gaudy are you? How this becomes the value system. It can become very easy to be sucked into that if you're not careful. If you're not careful. If you're passively taking in. We can't passively take in. This is why I say you have to guard your heart with your life. And that is guarding the eyes, the ears, and the tongue. What you talk about is so important. What is important to you is going to be what you talk about. And what you talk about is going to become more important to you. This is the cycle, isn't it? So be mindful of that. And allow Ramadan to be a time to become more mindful of that, because the shayateen are chained. The shayateen are chained. So we have only one thing that we're dealing with, and that is our nafs. Because ultimately, we usually have two enemies. We have the external enemy and we have the internal enemy. Everyone understand? Now the external enemy is shaitan and his army. But we also have an internal enemy, and that is our own nafs. That is our lower self. That is our desires, our hawa. So in Ramadan, so 1 month out of every year, Allah chains up the external enemy. Allah ties him up. So now we are left to confront what? The internal enemy. That's our nafs. That's our nafs. And when we fast, by the way, this is one of the best ways to tame the nafs. Fasting tames the nafs. It's like, you know, if you have a wild animal and you want to domesticate it, you want to break, you know, you need to break the horse. Basically, you need to domesticate it. You need to get it out of its wild, right? It's wild. One of the things you do is restrict food. Have you guys seen Spirit? That's like a cartoon from like a long time ago. You know what I'm talking about. They were trying to break Spirit. What did they do? No food. I mean, obviously he was very abusive, but the idea is we have it's kind of a wild beast inside us, which is our nafs. And we need to domesticate, we need to tame it. We need to tame it. That's not to say there's something wrong with you, by the way. That doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. This is not something's wrong with you, you have a nafs. Everyone has a nafs. Everyone has a nafs. The question is, how have you tamed your nafs? How have you tamed your nafs? Who has taken over? The nafs? Is the nafs stronger? Or is a purified qalb, heart, stronger? And this has everything to do with what you do every single day. Do you understand? Just like the health of your body has to do with what you do every single day. What are you eating? What are you drinking? Are you exercising? Are you getting, vitamins? Are you going in the sun? Are you getting vitamin D? Like, how are you taking? Are you resting? Are you getting enough sleep? The heart and the soul also need these things. So what I want to say to you is, when you're fasting and you're in Ramadan, you're already having the best chance to take on your nafs, because you're not dealing with the shaitan, the shayateen, or not as much, right? Whatever amount is chained, the big or the small, but it's that enemy has been chained. So now it's just you and your nafs, okay? And then Allah prescribes fasting, which now is weakening your nafs, so that you can strengthen your qalb, your heart. And to strengthen your heart, you gotta make sure that it's being well fed and not drinking poison and junk food, and that's it. And this is why I say, from a very practical perspective, one of the main parts of this is gonna be filtering your media. That's it. That's one of the biggest sources of either poison or junk food or healthy food for the heart, is your media. This is what you read, this is what you watch, this is, Netflix, etc., and this is social media, all of that. But this is also who you surround yourself with. I'll tell you something very important. If you take a person and you put them in an environment where everyone is remembering Allah, if you put them in the company of scholars and worshipers, what do you think is going to happen to that person? They're going to be influenced by that. The Prophet ﷺ said that good company is like entering into a perfume shop. You either come out with perfume or you come out smelling better. Bad company is like entering a blacksmith shop. You either get burnt or you come out smelling bad. When you're around somebody who's smoking, you don't have to smoke. You come out smelling like smoke. And that's what bad company does. If you put someone in an environment where the people around them are thinking more about the hereafter than the dunya, are more, conscious of Allah, remembering Allah, they're careful to pray on time, they have the proper perspective of dunya and akhirah, that person's going to be influenced by that. But if you take a person and you put them in an environment where all that's talked about is other people, what they're wearing, what they're doing, who they're marrying, who they're divorcing, who they're dating, whatever it is. You know what she did, you know what he did, you know what? If it's just about dunya, if that's all these people care about, this is called ghafla. Ghafla means heedlessness. It means these people do not think about akhirah, they think about dunya more. And sometimes, I'm not just talking about non-Muslims, I'm talking about Muslims. But these are people who money and status are what's most important. And if that is your environment, then you will be affected by that. You will become like that. Al-mar'u ala dini khalileh, the Prophet ﷺ said. A person is not just like their friend. A person is on the deen, the way of life, the deen of their closest friends or their closest companion. This includes who you marry, by the way. This is why it's very important. See, if you marry someone who has certain habits, you are affected by that. If your spouse smokes, even if you don't smoke, you're going to be affected by it. It goes in your lungs and it goes on your clothes. Same thing with spiritual habits. Same thing with salah habits. Same thing with everything. So al-mar'u ala dini khalili means you have to be very careful who you take as a khalil. You have to be very careful who you take as your closest companion. That is in terms of your social network, your social circle. That is in terms of your spouse. And that is in terms of your online community. Your media usage. Does that make sense? Al-mar'u ala dini khalili. I've even noticed this. Have you guys ever noticed, I don't know if you've noticed this phenomenon, when someone grows up and they have like a hero growing up, like maybe it's a sports hero, or maybe it's like a celebrity, but like this person like obsessed with this. I'm not just talking about like they like them, but they're like, my hero is it used to be like Kobe Bryant or something, like basketball, right? Or whatever. And for some people, it's maybe like someone from history, like Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, or the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or Sheikh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, and what I've noticed is that they start to resemble that person. Like they've read about them their whole life, or they've watched them their whole life. And they almost like subconsciously start to mimic or actually take on their qualities. And I've seen this. I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about. They'll start to have mannerisms like them, they have qualities like them. Subhanallah. So, al-mar'u ala dini khalile, it can also apply to who you take as your heroes. Who are your heroes? Even if they're dead. But you take them as your hero. This is what it means to take the Prophet ﷺ as your mentor and hero. You can actually take on his qualities. And you start to want to emulate him the more that you take him and you read about him and you know what I mean? You become fixated on him as a personality. But this can also happen with other personalities. So we have to be very, very conscious of what we're taking into our hearts. Now, why does overwhelm happen? Overwhelm can happen because of, one, repeated exposure can desensitize, but overwhelm can also happen when we have the wrong focus. Now this can apply, I've told you there's a spectrum, right? You have healthy food, you have the junk food, and then you have the poison. You have the poison. Now some people, their fridge has just junk food and poison. That's it. They have a bunch of bottles of cyanide, a bunch of, food that's covered in mold, stuff that when they eat, it's actually poison. And then junk food in between. What are the things that are poison for our heart? Obvious things, anything that we look at that is of the haram. Anything we listen to of the haram. Anything we talk about of the haram. These are more obvious. These are poisons for the heart. Obviously, this means, pornography, hearing, seeing, anything that is forbidden by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is poison for the heart. Allah tells us to guard our eyes because guarding our eyes is guarding our heart. Okay. But there are other things that can act like poison for the heart. And that is really, you have to be very careful not to spend too long focusing, reading about, thinking about evil. Does that make sense? Evil. The Epstein files are evil. I can tell you right now that if you were to sit and just like go into a rabbit hole, it will affect your heart. Because what we focus on grows. First thing that will happen when you focus on negative things, when you focus on evil things, when you focus on the bad, evil parts of this world, the first thing that will happen is it will grow in your eyes. What does that mean? First is it will look bigger than it is. Listen carefully. Let me give you an example. If someone is always watching news about shark attacks, so their search engine is filtered to give them every single incident of shark attacks every single day. It could be on the other side of the world. We weren't supposed to even know about that. But you have filtered your notifications to get every shark attack and then describe it in intricate detail. And that is what you're reading every single day. Do you know what's going to happen?